A very good evening to you all and welcome to the show. It's lovely to see so many of you here on this Monday evening. For those of you who were here last time for the first showing of Master H Meets, you will know that it works best if you have things on speaker view rather than gallery view. That means that you will have me on your screen as well as Rehana in due course. So can I encourage you to use speaker view? This is the second in our Master H Meets series, Inner Temple's answer to the Graham Norton show. And I'm delighted to welcome as my guest this evening, the wonderful Rehana Azib, barrister, bencher of the Inn, advocacy trainer, and I hope she won't mind me saying this, a very dear friend. Rehana, good evening.
Good evening, Alastair.
Welcome to the show. I hope this is not going to be too painful for you, but let's
so do I, Alastair, so do I.
Let's see how we get on. Rehana, let's start for many of the people watching, maybe towards the junior end of the profession. Let's start with your route to the bar. I think I read in an article a couple of years ago that life had humble beginnings. Talk us through your route to the bar.
Yeah, I suppose you could say it had humble beginnings, probably as sort of non-traditional as you can get. Both my parents were first-generation immigrants who came over from Pakistan in the 70s, and none of us knew anyone who'd been to university. We didn't know anyone who'd worked in an office. They were very hard-working, working-class parents. They did very, very difficult jobs to support myself and my 4 other siblings. I remember my dad doing really difficult factory work back in the days before the working time directive kicked in, doing sort of back-to-back 12-hour shifts. My mom was a dinner lady at the local school. She also used to make clothes, sew clothes for people to earn some money on the side. They never spent a penny on themselves. Everything that they had, they invested in their children, and all 5 of us went to university. I didn't know anyone in the law, the bar, the whole legal world was utterly alien to me, and I didn't even know if it was financially viable. But of course, thanks to the Inner Temple and their generous scholarship program, it became viable, and the rest, as they say, is history. So I guess I took I have an atypical background and an atypical route to the bar, but I hope that those watching that might have a similar background or similar features will be heartened by the fact that none of it was a bar to me becoming a successful barrister. It wasn't a hindrance. If anything, it gave me unique qualities and experiences that I hope make me a better barrister and a more interesting person, but I'll leave that to the audience to decide.
One of the questions that I'm often asked at the education evenings that we as an Inn run for the university students, is which of the 4 Inns should I join? I mean, think back to those university days when you were at Oxford. We're blessed to have you as a member of the Inner Temple, but what brought you to the Inner Temple? Was it Lord Justice Anthony May's line in the old days of saying that you should join the Inner Temple because it has the largest car park? That was one of Anthony May's selling points of the Inn. But why was it? Why Inner?
Well, shamefully, I don't actually have a driving license. And before you all gasp in horror, if anyone's ever seen me on a bumper car at the fun fair, you will realise that the roads are much safer without me on them. So the car park wasn't a draw, but I think it was the Inner Temple was really active in the student world. And actually, the thing that sold it for me was the dinner to the universities. As you know, the Inner Temple holds an annual dinner to the universities where, universities from all over the country come and have this wonderful dinner at the Inn. And you get to meet so many different people at the Inn, lots of benchers, judges, barristers who are all lovely. And I remember attending one of those dinners. I'm embarrassed to admit it. It was 1999, so it's literally last century. And met so many lovely people from the Inn, and a world that had seemed so inaccessible to me and so alien to me suddenly wasn't anymore. It just suddenly felt really accessible, and there were all these lovely people, and not only were they friendly, but they actually sort of made me feel that I would be welcome to, that, you know, whatever preconceptions or insecurities I had, they were my insecurities, but it didn't bother anybody else. And of course, the food was fantastic because the Inner Temple has by far the best food. And as you know, Alastair, I do love my food. So the dinner to universities was a big feature, but it was really the food that clinched it for me.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, I'll pass on a message to Martin Cheeseman, who would have been chef at the time, but I'm sure also Michael Wilson, our current head chef, would be delighted to hear that. Moving slightly further on, obviously to being called to the bar, one of the things that Master Treasurer has mentioned in his address at Call Nights this year is his desire to see the current cohort of students retain much contact with the inn in future years, you know, even if it's simply visiting the garden or whatever it may be, but with staying in touch with the inn. Think back all those years. In the light of that, which bencher moved your call? And perhaps more importantly, do you still speak to them, or are you still in touch with them?
I am. So the bencher who moved my call was Master de Navarro, who's a silk in my chambers. And actually, he couldn't be there that night of my call. I think he was in a trial or something, so somebody else filled in for him. But yeah, I'm very much in touch with him. He's hugely supportive. He is a wonderful, wonderful human being and a ferocious advocate. I mean, you learn so much watching him. He's an absolute darling. I am thrilled to be in the same chambers as him. And he continues to be supportive. We continue to support the inn together. And he was hugely supportive and congratulatory when I became a bencher. So shout out to Master de Navarro.
I mean, it is interesting because I speak to a number of people established in practice who are members of the inn, and I will sort of say, well, who moved your call to the bar? And they can at least remember that. Are you still in touch with them? Many of them say no, which I personally find a little bit strange. It's almost like severing the sort of main tie that you have with the inn, with the individual that actually catapults you into your career. Any thoughts on that?
I agree with you, and I think it's actually quite sad, and it's a real missed opportunity, because I think the barrister that sort of moves your call to the bar can be a really good contact to have, you know, at the bar if you want some advice, or you just want someone who's not in your chambers or not in your particular legal circle to speak to. It's a real missed opportunity. And now, since becoming a bencher, I've started moving students as well, calling them to the bar. And I sort of make a point of saying to them afterwards, you know, please do stay in touch and let me know what you're doing, because I think that's one of the wonderful privileges of being a master of the bench, that you really do, you get to meet people and see them at the very start of their legal career. I just can't imagine anything more rewarding than staying in touch with them and watching them develop.
Yeah. We know, I know from looking at your website, your sort of key specialist areas, employment law. Thankfully, you and I have never done a case against each other yet. Personal injury law. Were you always interested in those areas, or did that develop through pupillage and beyond?
Well, before I answer that, can I say I'm dreading the day you and I are against each other, because we know all our tricks.
Well, we'd just settle. We'd settle the case. We'd settle the case and go and have dinner is what we would do.
Yeah, we'd start dinner at 11 a.m. and just keep going to last man or woman standing. But that would be a real battle royale, I think, if you and I were against each other, because I know all of your tricks, Alastair, and you probably know all of mine as well.
Ridiculous.
But that aside, anyway, back to your original question. I always wanted to do personal injury because I really liked doing tort law at university, and Two Temple Gardens had a big personal injury practice. But I sort of fell into employment law because Two Temple Gardens did employment law, and I never studied labour law at university. I never took that labour law elective when I was at bar school. But I really, really loved advocacy, and I loved the sort of if I can call it that, the down and dirty advocacy. You know, people griping about each other, people gossiping at work, awful rumours, the harassment, the bullying. Obviously terrible behaviour, but from a lawyer's perspective, really interesting, and great cross-examination. And of course, cross-examining in the employment tribunal, as you well know, you have lay members as well as a judge. So it's probably the closest we civil practitioners would get to jury advocacy. So it was members of my chambers who were saying, got to give employment law a go. You're going to love it. You'll never look back. So I did my first employment case in my first year as a tenant, and I've never looked back. And now I'm the head of employment law. Still not sure quite how I got there, but absolutely loving it. And I'm a lover of gossip. So if you love gossip, all of you folks out there who are trying to decide what your area of specialism is going to be, employment law is for you. I guarantee it. Never gets dull.
Within the employment sphere and the personal injury sphere, and we're going to come on to advocacy itself in a moment, certainly from the employment point of view, I've always taken the view that the advocacy that one deploys, if you're acting for a claimant, can be in certain cases, especially discrimination cases, very different to the style of advocacy that you deploy if you're acting for an employer. Is your practice in both fields predominantly defendant stroke respondent, or do you keep your hand in with claimant work just to maintain, if you like, that almost ferocious advocacy that one needs if one's acting for the employee?
It's predominantly employer, but that's just the way the practice worked out. As you know, Alastair, you do a few cases for a particular client or for a particular company, and you just end up doing more, and that's the way your practice progresses. But I do some claimant work, and you're absolutely right. I think it's really important to do a little bit of both, not least because you risk becoming too employer-minded, and sometimes you forget to see things from the other side, and helps you to think about, well, what is it that might motivate the other side? Is this about principle for them? Do they want their day in court? Do they want to publicly shame the company for bad behaviour? Do they want a settlement, etc.? I know these are all the questions you always ask yourself in any sort of case, but I think representing claimants on occasion just helps you to get a bit of insight, additional insight. And you're absolutely right. The way you have to tailor your advocacy, sort of tone it down or dial it up, depending on which side you're on and what you think the appetite of the tribunal might be, where people's subconscious prejudices might lie. Because sometimes, you know, if you're representing a large employer, a national and multinational company with huge resources behind them, sometimes the natural and human reaction is to take against them automatically. You think they must be in the wrong. There's a really sort of cutthroat environment, and you as an advocate have to be sensitive to that, and you have to sort of tailor your advocacy to make sure that you are conscious of and address any subconscious prejudices that the panel might have.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Let's come back to Inner Temple. I mean, I know that you are an advocacy trainer of much repute, but can you, for those members who may be watching the show, who may be considering becoming advocacy trainers, when did you become an advocacy trainer for the Inn, and why, and what was the training like to go from that step to becoming an advocacy trainer for the Inn?
Okay, the training was utterly terrifying, but I'm really glad that I did it, and actually really enjoyable. But I think it's because when you get to the point where you become an advocacy trainer, you probably haven't been assessed in any way or attended an interview since you've been a pupil or a new practitioner. So it's the first time that you actually feel like your advocacy or the quality of your advocacy assessment is being judged. And we're not used to that because we work in a vacuum, we work independently. So that's why it was terrifying. But I did my advocacy training in 2012. And I was actually signed up by somebody who's a bencher at the Inn, who shall remain nameless, but this person actually trained
very wise
me
for personal purposes, very wise.
Absolutely. This person's paid me a huge amount of money to keep my mouth shut. And I shall honour that.
It's bound to be Anthony Leonard then. Sorry.
But they signed me up because I remember bumping into them at an event. I think it might have been an Inn event, and they were encouraging me to do it. Like, I was too scared to do it, and they said to me, "Well, you know, I'm just going to sign you up." And they did, true to their word. And so there was no backing out, but I'm so glad that they did, because had they not signed me up, I probably would have been too afraid or too apprehensive to do it, or I would have waited another few years. And it would have been my loss. I would have missed out on so much. And you know this, Alastair, better than anyone, that the sort of advocacy crowd, if I can call them that, our group of advocacy trainers at the Inner Temple, we have such a good rapport and such a good friendship. And we have so much fun together at every single advocacy event that we're doing. So much fun. I've made some great friends through the end. I would have missed out on all of that if I hadn't been signed up forcibly against my will to do the advocacy training. But I remember doing the weekend itself. What was really surprising was that everyone was actually really friendly, the advocacy trainers, and everyone's got a different style to training. And what was the most surprising thing now in hindsight is everyone was absolutely lovely. But Alastair, you were one of my teacher trainers. And I know you to be one of the loveliest, friendliest, most charming people I have ever met. But your teacher training face is vicious. Absolutely vicious.
I suppose it is vicious.
I don't know if you realise this, but you get a really stern expression on your face. And I think it's when you're concentrating, but it just puts the fear of God into you. I remember you were watching me train one of the students because you were going to be assessing my review, and you sort of had that look and that furrowed brow on your face. And I was actually shaking while I was doing it, because I thought, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm going to get reported to the BSB or something. I'm not fit to be an advocate. And you were absolutely lovely in your feedback, but you need to work on your teacher trainer face.
Well, I shall. I'll take that on board for the next session. Just going back to something you said a moment ago. I mean, I think I fall into the same category as an employment lawyer. One of the great things, and again, this is for the benefit of any members of the Inn who are thinking of becoming advocacy trainers. I mean, I can think of people like Master Corner, Master Leonard, Master Pegden, people, for example, in criminal practice, that I would never have come across in my career professionally, but know very well through that wonderful advocacy training unit that we have. And it just means that you meet far more people, I think. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. And it's even more than that. I have unquestionably become a better advocate from becoming an advocacy trainer, not just because it makes you more analytical of your own advocacy, but because you learn so much from your fellow trainers. And in particular, when I'm teaching with criminal practitioners, I don't get to see criminal advocacy. I don't get to see criminal cross-examination. They're just such great tips that you can pick up from your fellow trainers. And because we all have such a great friendship, what's wonderful is that if I have a particularly tricky case, or I know I've got a particularly tricky witness, I know I can speak to a couple of the advocacy trainers and say, not really sure how to approach this witness, or I was thinking about doing it this way. What do you think? And you just pick up some great tips. I mean, the number of times I've picked Anthony Leonard's brains about cross-examining, because I know he misses that since going to the bench. He's a phenomenal judge, but I know he misses the advocacy. And I think he won't mind me saying this, that he actually quite likes it when you sort of discuss with him, how are we going to go about this cross-examination, because it reminds him of all the fun he had at bar. So you get so much out of it. And I haven't even talked about the satisfaction of teaching people, and in particular teaching pupils, because pupillage is such a difficult time. It's fraught with worry and it's fraught with stress, and you're constantly being assessed and you feel like you're constantly being judged. But Alastair, you know that when we do our residential pupils weekends, and the improvement we see, not just in advocacy, but in the confidence of the pupils from the Friday evening to the Sunday lunchtime, it's phenomenal and it's so rewarding. And it's so worth giving up your weekend for. It doesn't feel like a chore. It actually feels really enjoyable. And I always look forward to the advocacy teaching weekends. They're so much fun, as you well know, although you don't sleep very much.
I guess it's that sort of feeling of taking a pupil and looking at, if you're a group leader, looking at where they are at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and then comparing them to how they are at 1 p.m. on the Sunday when we finish. And in almost all cases, there is no comparison, is there?
Yeah, absolutely. And they come on leaps and bounds. And the beautiful thing is they always had it in them. They always had that talent and that ability in them, and most of them don't realize it and think they don't. And when you can draw it out of them and make them see what great skills they've got and how to hone them, that's so satisfying. And I do say to them, whenever I have a group, I sort of say to them, look, any advocacy victory that you have from now on is entirely attributable to me, and I'm taking full credit for it, which I think is fair. And none of them have disagreed with me.
So far,
yeah. To my face.
Now, I know, because I've seen it, you obviously displayed tremendous talent as an advocacy trainer, and very soon into the process, the powers that be, Masters Leonard Corner, elevated you to teacher trainer grade, which means that you are able to train people to be trainers, as well as obviously teaching pupils and new practitioners. With a few years behind you now of being a teacher trainer, which do you actually prefer? Do you prefer training new trainers, or do you still prefer what I would call the grassroots of advocacy training, taking a group of pupils, taking a group of new practitioners?
That's actually a really tough question. That's a really tough question. They're different. Being a teacher trainer is super nerve-wracking in this sense that when you're an advocacy trainer, as you know, Alastair, we teach in pairs. Sometimes there's 3 of you.
Yeah.
You know, if you're sort of struggling a bit with a review, you've always got your fellow trainer to sort of help you out. But when you're a teacher trainer and you're reviewing someone else's review, you have to absolutely get it right. Yeah. Because if you get it wrong, you will be passing on erroneous knowledge to a new advocacy trainer, and they will then be passing on that erroneous knowledge to all the people that they train. So there's more pressure behind it. But it's fun. I have to say, though, on balance, I prefer the grassroots advocacy teaching, because the results are sort of more immediately visible.
Yes, yeah, I can understand that.
But it's still very satisfying. You'll know this. You know, when you've sort of trained someone on a teacher training weekend to become an advocacy trainer, and then you see them a few years later and they're a new practitioner trainer, or they're a teacher trainer themselves.
Yeah,
that's really satisfying. You sort of feel really proud of them. And again, I take full credit for that and tell them so.
One of the, I mean, in addition to your teacher training responsibilities, I know that because you took it over from me, you're also course director for the Pupil Practice Management course, which I believe, from reading the missives from the BSB, is no longer compulsory. Firstly, for the benefit of our, I guess, sort of younger members of the Inn who are maybe either students or pupils, what is the practice management course? And then flowing from that, how do you feel being in charge of it, that the BSB have said it's no longer a compulsory course for the education of our young barristers?
Okay, I think the best way to describe the practice management course is that we try and teach you all the things that no one really tells you during pupillage, and you're too afraid to ask during pupillage, in a nutshell. So things like accounting. We have Mason Bloom from Silver Levine come in and give all of the pupils a talk about managing your accounts. What do you have to do in terms of your tax? How do you keep a track of your expenses? What's tax deductible? What isn't? You know, how do you manage your finances at the bar? And often, you know, these are questions that you're too afraid to ask, particularly when you're a pupil. But not just that, we have talks. For example, Master Treasurer gives a talk about the Bar Council. And actually, look, what is the Bar Council? What does it do? What's its role for you? How can you make use of the Bar Council in a way that no one really tells you? You know, you can read the sort of official blurb, but that doesn't really tell you, well, what does that mean to me? How's that going to help me? We have a talk about well-being at the bar that Master Spearing gives. And that's really helpful because it teaches the pupils about managing stress at the bar and about being alive to the signs of stress and managing their practice and maintaining, as far as possible, a work-life balance. And we have talks from senior clerks, from solicitors, from barristers and from judges, all about the relationship between you and your clerk, the relationship between you and your solicitor, a view from a bench, your first days in court, all of those things that you really, really want to know, but are too scared to ask. And finally, you wrap up the day.
I think you're almost, I think I've almost anticipated how you're going to answer the second part of my question. The BSB has now said that this, what I consider to be amazing course, is no longer compulsory. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a shame. I mean, I'm never a fan of piling on the obligations on barristers, particularly on pupils, because I understand it's a tough year and there's a lot of things you have to do, but it's so useful. And without it, there is so much information that they're just not going to get or have access to. And unless they've got somebody who they can ask, unless they've got a good relationship, they have a mentor at the bar, or they've got a good relationship with the bencher that called them to the bar. But having said that, we rolled the course out, I think it was in January 2020, at a time when it wasn't compulsory. And the take-up was huge. We had so many people.
So even though it wasn't mandatory, the majority of the pupils took the view, yeah, we will give up our Saturday and we will come on this course.
Yes, and they were happy to do so, and the feedback was fantastic. Yeah. And we also had a talk at the end of the day by somebody called Master Alastair Hodge. I don't know if you know him, but he was giving a talk just about CPD and marketing, you know, again, all the things that people don't really tell you. And apparently it was very well received.
Sorry to interrupt. Greg Dorey, episode 1 of Master H Meets, never gave me this much grief, but do carry on.
Well, apparently the talk was very well received. But I do have to say that I myself gave that talk the previous year. And that was also, I hear, very well received. So we'll have to decide who's doing it next year, Alastair.
We'll look forward to it.
We could do a double act.
We could do a double act. Let's jump further into the profession. You may know that very, very recently the email has gone out from the Treasury Office seeking applications for people this year to be elected as benchers of the Inn. And in fact, I saw this afternoon that there's an article in the Inn Review about it. But if there are any members of the Inn who are considering applying to be benchers that are listening to the show tonight, what has life been like since you became a bencher? And what advice would you give to those who are thinking, but are maybe apprehensive or scared about applying to be benchers of the Inn?
Okay, well, anyone who's thinking about applying, don't be scared or put off. And if you are apprehensive, speak to someone, speak to one of the benchers at the Inn, talk about what your concerns are. Life as a bencher is great, okay? They give you a fob that gets you in pretty much anywhere in the Inner Temple. And you get free tea and coffee in hall, which is brilliant. But more than that, you get to do so much more with the Inn. I mean, the most amazing thing about being a bencher is getting to do call night. Not just calling people to the bar, but meeting students and their families. It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I think I sort of, obviously before the pandemic hit and everything moved online, I think I went to every single call night since I became a bencher because I wanted to. I just loved it so much. And so anyone who's thinking of applying, you know, don't be put off. Don't be put off in asking for advice about it. But if you are going to apply, I would say this: do it for the right reasons. Do it because you want to get more involved with the Inn. Do it because you want to do more for your Inn. Because when you become a bencher, you have the chance to sit on all sorts of committees and contribute in so many different ways to the Inn. And you should do that. We should all do that because, you know, we all invest in the next generation of barristers in the same way that the barristers and judges that came before us invested their time in the Inn and invested their time in us and in educating us. And we're now paying it forward to the next generation. I think there's a duty on all of us to do that. And I think it's an even higher duty when you are a bencher, and it's a wonderful privilege. But with that privilege comes responsibility. To quote Spider-Man's uncle, with great power comes great responsibility. So, you know, do it. I would encourage anyone to do it. But if you do it and you apply, please do get as involved as possible with the inn. You know, keep staying involved in the inn. Keep giving your time to the inn. It's so worth it, and you'll get so much out of it. You make so many wonderful friendships. And then I have to come back to this: the food. Yeah, the food is amazing.
I mean, I think given that the Master Treasurer is with us this evening, I would anticipate, Rehana, at some point tomorrow, you might receive an email from him asking for a paper for the executive committee on the role of Spider-Man in the future of the Inner Temple, given the analogy that you have used this evening. But just moving away from Spider-Man, just really let me ask you this. We've heard of the practicing barrister Rehana, we've heard about bencher Rehana, we've heard about advocacy trainer Rehana. But if I said the words Dolph and Lundgren to you, would that mean anything, perhaps?
The word that comes to mind is perfection.
Ah. Well, I think you better tell them, for the audience members who don't know who Dolph Lundgren is, I think you better tell them who he is.
Now, Dolph Lundgren, where do I start? And most of you will know Dolph Lundgren as a heavyweight action hero. He was the original He-Man in the film Masters of the Universe. He was Ivan Drago, Rocky's biggest nemesis to date in Rocky IV. He was in the Expendables, he was in the Universal Soldier, but he's so much more than that. He's proficient in the martial arts. He's also an intellectual, an academic. Not many people know this, but he has a master's degree in chemical engineering. And I think there's so much that we could learn from Dolph Lundgren, the film star, and Dolph Lundgren, the man. And often whenever I find myself in a difficult situation in life, I'm not sure what to do, I ask myself, what would Dolph do? And the answer just presents itself.
So this man, this sort of Adonis.
Yeah, he's more than a man, Alastair. He's much more than a man.
Right. So perhaps a matter for the Bencher Nomination Committee, one of our future honorary benchers of the inn, we should be giving consideration to Dolph Lundgren.
Well, absolutely. I know that the inn likes to recognise the contribution that people have made to life and to the country. And I know that Master Treasurer is a member of the audience today, so the Master Treasurer might like to consider whether honorary benchership should be extended to action heroes. I don't think any class of actor or entertainer should be excluded. It's certainly worth consideration. And again, if you require a paper on the subject, I'd be more than happy to provide one.
Yes, well, absolutely amazing. The next thing you're going to be telling us is that you're a fan of WWF or something like that, no doubt.
Well, it's funny you should say that. First of all, it's WWE.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry, but it's all that grappling and wrestling stuff.
Yeah. I am a huge fan. I'm a lifelong fan. And in fact, I have a very special observer with me today. So if you'll just bear with me a second,
yes, of course.
I shall introduce you to my mentor. This is Mark Calloway, otherwise known as The Undertaker. And you'll see his signature there. Now, he watches over me when I'm working and doing things like this interview. And I'm not really sure that there's much else to say.
He's one of these chaps that gets into the ring and, you know, does his stuff.
Gets into the ring and does his stuff, doesn't even begin to do justice.
Well, I've never watched WWE, so I mean, I'm just sort of imagine. I mean, is he one of these sort of powerhouses that just sort of lands on people and they get carted off on a stretcher?
Okay, we're going to have to go back to basics here. So let's go back to basics. He is known in wrestling circles as the Phenom. Okay, when the Undertaker approaches, the lights go out, the bells toll, The druids come out in a procession, and the undertaker follows in a swirl of smoke and mystery.
Right. Well, this is something that I'm sure that I will look up probably in 2027 or something like that. Rehana, I'm mindful as always of the time. It is 5 past the hour of 7. Master Rehana Azib, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening on the second Master H Meets. Thank you to the audience. Thank you all for coming. Thanks again to Master Azib. The next Master H Meets will be taking place on the 10th of May 2021, when I will be meeting Sean Harkin, who is the head gardener with the Inner Temple. And we're going to be not talking about the Undertaker or indeed Dolph Lundgren. We're probably going to be saying a fair bit about plants and flora and fungi. So do join us on the 10th of May for my conversation with Sean Harkin. This has been a Revels production for the Honourable Society of the Inner Temple. Executive producer Henrietta Amodio, produced by Kate Peters and Paul Clark. My name is Alastair Hodge, aka Master H, and this is me, Master H, saying thank you again, Rehana, and good night. Good night.
Nice, everyone.